Kia ora te whānau. Today we are going to be exploring into depth with the bench press. I'm really excited about this one because I'm going to show you some things that maybe you haven't seen before, hopefully answer some questions about this whole movement itself, and really just go into some depth with the way you can set up, and then hopefully some things to make it a little bit easier for you. Lots of people ask about the setup all the time and why do we practice this variation of our setup. So yeah, let's dive in. So one of the first things you want to get on top of is how you set up the entire area. It's a little bit more difficult when you go to gyms that already have a barbell bench press setup. So sometimes you go into places where the whole piece is already together. The racks are actually connected to the bench, so you can't really determine the height of the racks and then the bench position, which is not really ideal, but usually they set it up in a way that it's pretty similar to what we'll have in a rig setup. So obviously today we're using the rig setup. The first thing I like to do is set up my bench and my barbell, okay, to the optimal height for myself. Everyone's got different length arms, and the arm length will actually be manipulated by how you set up your body as well. So what we want to go and do is get our bench into like a general kind of position and get our barbell height set up to like about hip height to start with. Then we can adjust it from there. I like to have mine set on 10 for the Again Faster equipment. Okay, so we've got this one just back here. You can see how it's set up there. And then I like to set my bench up straight after I've set up my barbell. I've done it for a long time now, so I know exactly where I like to have it. So it might just be a bit of playing around for you. What you want to make sure is that when you are set up underneath the barbell, you don't have to protract to get the bar out each time. Okay, so protraction through the shoulders or just pushing those shoulders off the bench. We don't really want to do that, especially if we get into heavier loads. That's really not ideal. It really messes with our setup. So we want to get it to a height that's good enough that when I go to press the bar off, I'm just using the extension of my arms. So as you can see here, when I lie back to get set up, the bar is nice and high, okay, so that when it comes to getting into position and pressing it out, I just extend the elbows and now it's out. All right. There's no need for me to push the shoulders off the bench, okay, so I don't need to do this to get the bar out. And I don't have to start too flexed. So the other issue is that you start with the bar too low and you're already kind of doing an extra rep to get it out. This is a big problem if you are lifting for a 1RM or even 2s, because it's kind of like doing an extra rep that you didn't need to do. So for example, if it was set like 2 or so lower, like if I was starting here, you can see that flexion through my elbows, and to get the bar out, I'd have to extend that high to get the bar out each time. So really not an ideal setup. That's why we set the barbell there. The next important part is where to set the bench. All right, when we set up the bench, we have to be aware of, I guess, our level of understanding with regards to where the bar is going to move after you remove it from the rig. So when I bring the bar out, ideally with heavier weights, I want to make sure that I don't have too much displacement from where the bar started to where it's going to be once in position. So as you can see from here, I would usually get the bar to start around eye level for most people that are beginning, just so that they don't hit into the rig. So as an example, when you start with eye level, when the bar comes out, it's well away from the rig. So when I do any pressing, even if I press it kind of on an angle, I'm not going to hit the rig at all, okay? If you get this set up wrong and you're not aware of the bar path or the movement of the bar and you're too far in, when you press the bar, sometimes you'll hit the hooks, especially when you're not used to your pressing movement. As you become more advanced with your lifting and more aware of the bar path that you are used to, you can set yourself up as close as you can into the rig. So usually I'll use my chin as a guide for myself because I don't really want to move the bar so far out of the rig each time. It's just extra work that I didn't need to do. So I set it up right in line with my chin, and then I go through my setup, and then when I press it, It doesn't have to move far at all. And now I can perform my reps. I didn't have to move the bar too far away each time. So that's how we set up the bar and the bench. All right, the next thing is kind of setting up our body, and there's a few different areas we need to set up. I just break them up into thirds. So one's kind of like your hands and your arms. Two is all of your torso to, I guess, down through the glutes, etc. And three is your feet. Okay, so when we're setting up our hands, we want to make sure that the hands are set at the same balanced width. All right, one, so we don't get lopsided. And two, so that we're getting it into a position that when I press, it's not going to flare my arms too much. Okay, this can determine whether your grip setup in relation to your pressing setup is going to be more of a close grip press, which targets more through the triceps because the arms are tucked into the body more, or a wide grip press where the arms flare out a little bit. You kind of want to go halfway between the both of them, what feels comfortable for you. So for me, I've always just set up just outside my shoulder width. All right, it's the same for my strict press. Just outside shoulder width apart seems to be a good setup for myself. Makes me feel tight and allows me to get that angle that everyone talks about. So I think this is where a lot of coaches go wrong, is they try to tell people you need this 45-degree angle at the armpit, but I think that's a really bad cue because nobody owns a protractor.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here. Get out of here, man.
But also the fact that how do you know if you've got a 45-degree angle at your armpit? What's easier to know is where the bar is moving toward each time, because that creates the 45-degree angle just on its own. All right, so if I was to show you a couple reps, hopefully you can see, I'll do a side angle too. When I aim for my upper chest, there's way more of an angle, like a 90-degree angle almost at my armpit. So as I press, aim for upper chest, that's what happens to the angle at the armpit. If I aim for the bottom of my chest, notice how the elbows drift closer to the body during the press. Okay, so as we go through each one of our presses, that's how I get my natural 45-degree angle at my armpit. And that's how I keep it like in a lot safer, tighter position. The reason they say to use that type of angle, especially when you're lifting heavier weights, is because it is easier to engage through the muscles responsible for stability around the shoulder girdle. All right, so you've got your external rotators, your lats, those are a big one as well, to help with shoulder stability. So that's why when it's kind of tucked in like this, you can feel a little bit more engagement through your upper back. So that's how we set up the hands and the arms. The next part is the torso. So I've got a few side angles with the lid off, just so that you can see the amount of kind of, I guess, mobility happening through the spine. There's a few other exercises that I would probably recommend or suggest to do before you do any heavy bench pressing, just so that you can really build that mobility through the spine. You can see in here, there's quite a lot of mobility in the spine. Not as much as what you'll get in some powerlifters. Some of them are just insane. They're like contortionists. But we want a little bit of mobility in there because this allows us to get that anterior tension before we do our press and just really feel tight and stable. When you're setting up your torso and your feet, what your focus is trying to create stability. Okay, so we want as much stability as we can because a tight, stable base is much easier to press off than a loose base. I always like to use the analogy about the basketball. All right, it's much easier to get a blown up basketball to bounce back off a wall than it is to get a soft basketball that's got not enough air in it to bounce off a wall. So that's how you want to think about your body on setups for compound lifts, is getting it really tight so that we've got a really strong base to press off, not compliant base. In this variation, we're going to set up with the toes making contact with the ground, heels off the ground and feet tucked under behind us. Of course, you're welcome to try it with flat feet as well. Flat feet is good too, and sometimes people with better mobility through the ankles have a lot more success a flat foot press too, because they can get that same kind of anterior tension that they feel that they need, or they can just build enough stability with their feet in that position to make sure that their press is nice and stable each time. The last thing we want to think about is how we move the weight, all right? And this is really important, especially when you're working up from lighter weights to heavier weights. We don't want to change anything all the way up. Obviously it's going to get harder, but as it gets harder, you will recruit more muscle. And as you get stronger, those heavier weights will feel a lot easier to move. Now, force production really relies on intent behind movement. You'll create more force if you move the bar with more intent. So I'll just show you a few reps on how I would imagine doing it, and some of the cues that I use for people when they are lifting quite heavy and you can see that they're starting to fatigue. So once in position, when we get our setup ready to go, traps in, everything's tight, out comes the bar. We're going to control the weight down so we can hit the right spot on our chest, then drive it up fast. All right, control, drive, control, drive, control, drive. Well, fighter, if you made it this far in the video, you might as well drop a young sword in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and supporting our journey. Please follow us, please subscribe, and turn your alerts on so you can see more videos like this one. Cheers, fighter.